let's have a look at some transition metals. In fact, I'm going to have a look at the transition metal salts, and I've got a collection here. I don't have all of them by any stretch of the imagination. I don't have any scandium or titanium ones, but the first one I do have is vanadium. And vanadium here, this is vanadium oxide, and it is this sort of very blackish colour. Some vanadium salts are really beautiful, and if you have a look, I've done a video with some of these vanadium salts, and feel free to have a look at some of those. They're quite pretty. So after vanadium, we've got in this periodic table next chromium. I don't have many chromium salts that I actually use, but I do have potassium dichromate, and you can see here it is this beautiful orange colour of the chromium. So the chromiums tend to be these sort of yellow colours. The next in my list are the manganeses. This is manganese chloride, and manganese chloride is this pretty pink, which you might just be able to sort of see. So manganese chloride, and if we look at some others in the manganese family, I've got here manganese oxide and manganese sulfate. Manganese sulfate again is this very pretty pink, but boringly, manganese oxide is a very black colour chemical. So there is the manganese. Following on from manganese in the periodic table, we've got iron. Iron comes in, I've got quite a few iron chemicals. I've got this one here. This is this sort of almost pinkish colour. This is iron 3 sulfate, which is quite different in colour from iron 2 sulfate, which is sort of a green colour. Some other iron chemicals are quite beautiful. We've got here this one. This is iron nitrate, and that is this lovely pink, but when you make it wet, and you can see it's some water's already condensed on it, that it goes this sort of brownish colour, and you can see it's on the lid as well. Iron chloride is noticeable for its beautiful colour as well, and I'll grab a lump of this so we can have a look, and it makes these huge sort of lumps, crystals of, there we are, iron chloride. So that's iron 3 chloride, which I've managed to get all over the place. And the last of this family I want to have a look at is one that's probably the most familiar to you, which is iron oxide. And iron oxide is this brown colour of rust. We also have iron 2 oxide, which is one I don't have, which is sort of more black in colour. Next on our list is cobalt. Cobalt is this beautiful reddish colour, almost purple really, and this is cobalt chloride, and if we look at this, this is cobalt nitrate, which is this lovely brownish reddish colour. And finally in this series we've got cobalt sulfate, which is more of a sort of pinkish colour, I suppose, if I had to sort of guess what it is. Next along in the periodic table is nickel. Now these are much nastier substances. They are really beautiful, but they are sort of quite dangerous, and they carry certainly a lot of public health warnings. This is nickel 2 sulfate, which is the most beautiful emerald sort of green and a truly beautiful colour, and of course very deadly. And then nickel nitrate, which is also a lovely green colour. So the nickels are very green in colour and quite deadly. If we have a look at copper, then copper, one you're familiar with, is probably copper oxide. This is black copper oxide, and done in many experiments that students sort of do. But there's another form of copper oxide. This is copper 1 oxide, and I'll put them side by side so you can see them. And here you can see we've got red copper oxide, sometimes called cuprous oxide, and very pretty again. Copper sulfate we looked at, but it comes in another form here, anhydrous copper sulfate, which is almost white. It's got a hint of blue here, and this is simply because mine has picked up some water in the air. So there's some coppers, but we're not complete without looking at copper chloride. Copper chloride is a weird one. This looks almost sort of a green, but when you make up a solution of copper chloride, it goes blue. Copper carbonate, one that you may be familiar with. You see it on roofs sometimes, and this is this sort of powder of sort of this green stuff. So there's the coppers. The last in this transition metal set are the zincs. Zincs are in some ways not true transition metals because they've got a completely full shell. So zinc sulfate there is almost a boring white. And the last two, we've got zinc carbonate, which is again a very white colour, and this is all wrapped up, but we can see that it's just a white powder. And finally, one that's really rather odd here, and this is zinc oxide. And zinc oxide, if I can open it, is white. So are the others. But when you heat zinc oxide, it turns yellow. So that's gone through the salts along the periodic table. But I do want to show you just two more. This is probably the most expensive chemical I have. This is silver nitrate. And this is in fact just a sort of a silvery grey colour, which you might just about be able to see. And my last one is one that doesn't come out very often, and this is Mercury. Not a salt here, because it's really even too dangerous to have as a salt. This is Mercury in a bottle. It is really heavy, and what you may be able to see there is a ball bearing, and this ball bearing is floating in the mercury. Mercury, one of the few liquid metals. At room temperature, really it's the only one, although you may have met gallium, which is liquid, but at around about 30 Celsius. But then that one isn't a transition metal. So a vast array here of pretty chemicals. The thing that all the transition metals have is their coloured salts. The exceptions are scandium and zinc.